Today we're taking a look at They Called Us Enemy by George Takei. He had a couple of co-writers, Justin Eisinger and Stephen Scott, with art by Harmony Becker. The copy I'm looking at that I just got in is the expanded edition hardcover. This book came out originally as a trade paperback only in 2020. The trade paperback was 208 pages, and the expanded hardcover is 224. There's some extra material at the back, primarily some photos of him winning some awards and working with the writer and the artist, and it's pretty good. It's really nice. I'll show some cover comparison shots here, and you can see we got a little bit of an increase in size. Not much, a little bit. I still wish it was bigger. You can take a look here how it compares to a regular comic book. So it's actually closer to a digest size. Not my preferred format, but it's a great book. We'll get into it. So I'm not familiar at all with the co-writers on this book. I've never heard of them or seen anything they've done, read anything. Same with the artist. I'm not familiar with Harmony Becker. It's good stuff, but I don't really have much to say about them because I'm not familiar with them. Of course, I do know George Takei. I mean, I don't know him, but most geeks of my age and many even younger feel like they know him because we watched him so much on Star Trek, the original Star Trek. I'll show some pictures here. Star Trek was a big part of my childhood, watching the reruns with my dad, and I will never forget episode 4. I looked up the title. I didn't have it memorized, but it was called The Naked Time. But it's several of the crew lose their minds and they go a little crazy for a while. And among them, of course, Sulu does. And no one will ever forget this iconic image of him running around the Enterprise with the fencing sword and no shirt. And, he turns into this swashbuckling character. And it's fabulous. It's really good. I mean, that image and that sequence is just seared in the brain. You'll never forget that when you watch that episode. And no one could ever forget George Takei anyway. I mean, he's just a great actor and a great character in Sulu. And I mean, he's done a lot of stuff since. He's done musicals and all kinds of things. He's kind of an activist. But that's what I know him from, and what's near and dear to me is Sulu, great stuff. But what we didn't know, I mean, he was a great actor for sure, but what we didn't know was the incredible childhood Takei had, living in so-called internment camps, treated like an enemy combatant by the only country he ever knew. I mean, he was born here. I mean, he's of Japanese parents, but he was born in America. He's an American. This book tells the gut-wrenching story of George Takei and his family's struggle during a really dark time in this country's history. In 1942, right after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, President Roosevelt, he put forth this order and he rounded up some 120,000 people, incarcerated them effectively, and moved them to these, what they called relocation centers or internment camps. But they were in fact concentrated camps. I mean, that's what it was. I mean, we weren't gassing these people or killing them, but we were treating them pretty bad. Sometimes, certainly less than a human should be treated. These are mostly people living on the West Coast. Some of them were born in America, and this is the only country they ever knew, like George. And some were immigrants, like his father, and they'd established businesses, and some were, well-to-do business owners, and they lost everything. They lost their homes, their businesses, their freedom, and their dignity, really. I mean, it was awful. I mean, I knew about this stuff. I remember in school in history they touched on it, but I mean, really a little more than a footnote. I mean, we didn't get this visceral, personal story that we're getting here. And I mean, I knew about it, but I don't think I really knew about it. I didn't know the extent of it. I didn't know those people were treated like cattle or worse. And it was just awful. I mean, I was reading some of the reviews on Amazon when I was looking up links for this and getting the page counts and things like that. And somebody gave it a bad review, and he was like, well, George really glosses over a lot of the details, and they did actually find some Japanese double agents living in America as citizens at that time, and so that's why this had to happen. And I'm like, if that's what you're taking from this, you're really missing the boat. You, uh, it doesn't matter if there were a few double agents. The vast majority of these people who were incarcerated were as innocent as anyone could be. They were just Japanese, or they looked like Japanese in some cases. They weren't even Japanese. I mean, it's crazy if you think it's okay to treat that large of a group of people harshly and criminally because of a possibility of a few double agents. I mean, that's insane. But you some people. I mean, yeah, I think we need to never forget this because I mean, I love America, and so does George Takei. I mean, this you'll see that when you read this book. But we've made some mistakes, some really bad ones sometimes. So I think it's an important work. But the story shows that despite all this happening, he has some fond memories of his childhood. He stayed happy, and that's mostly a credit to his parents. They did everything they could to try to keep it as not normal, but close to normal as possible. That the fact that they lost, their homes, they're forced into these conditions that it's just terrible. It's a terrible, terrible story in some ways, but it's uplifting in others because they made it through. I mean, look at the success he's had. So it's an important work, and I think every comic book fan, every fan of this medium, every fan of George Takei should read this book. And I can't stress it enough. It's important. So for me, this is 9 stars. The only reason it's not 10 is I really think it could benefit from color, from full color, and a larger format. I mean, if anything deserves a deluxe, a truly deluxe, not just expanded, but large format book, it's an important one like this one. So if Top Shelf decides to make a third version of this, with the upgraded size, even in full color, I'm there. I'll buy it again. You know, uh, so for me, and also the art is not. I mean, it's good. You can see from the scans I've ran, that it's nice, clean work. Uh, but Harmony Becker sort of straddles the line between cartoony, which is not really my preference, especially for what is a seriously important work, and realistic. So she kind of rides that middle ground, and it works, but it's just not my preference. Yeah. But having said that, her storytelling is really nice, and she knows how to tell a story, and she did bring it to life. So props for that. It's still a 9-star book for me. This thing has won numerous awards, including the 2020 Eisner Award for Best Reality-Based Work. So that was cool. It's a great, important work, and it won't take you long to read it. It's a couple hundred pages, but you'll go through it quick, and it's great. Can't recommend it enough. So I'll be back next Monday, which is March 28th, and I'll be doing the Iron Man Marvel Omnibus of David Michelinie, John Romita Jr., and Bob Layton. That's a long title, but there's what the cover looks like. Great stuff. Please come back for that. I'll see you then.